Well, hello, Aravaipa family. I am Julie. I'm joined here this evening by Chris Worden. Chris Worden is one of our local runners here in Phoenix, and we are going to chat with him today because he has actually been working this summer doing his own Every Damn Street project before we even started it. So he's going to tell us a little bit about what that experience was like. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Julie.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Glad to share my experience.
We're glad to hear about it. So, when did you start this project and how did you come up with the idea?
Well, I started it actually a little bit earlier in the year. I would say it was about maybe March. It was a little bit before everything had started to shutter in regards to the pandemic. I had started a running streak last September where I was committing myself to try and run or walk, to move 3 miles a day on my feet or an hour, whatever I could muster as far as time goes. So I started doing it, and I started getting bored with the quote loop that everybody always has around their neighborhood, around their house. So I started to make a left turn here, make a right turn there. Then I started looking at my Strava heat map, and I realized, oh wow, I've been covering everything within my neighborhood and the surrounding areas. And so late this spring, I decided, well, I had heard from Jamil about Ricky Gates doing the Every Street project in San Francisco. Nothing so ambitious, but I thought, well, I think it'd be kind of fun to fill in as much of the Strava heat maps with red and blue as I can. And so over the course of, I would say, March, April, May, maybe into June, I think that's when I actually finished the project. I covered the entirety of my zip code, which is the 85257 zip code in South Scottsdale.
Do you know how many miles that ended up? Did you calculate it?
I did not. If I had to venture a guess, it probably would have been about between 80 and 100 if I had to guess. My longest run in the neighborhood was a full-on marathon, about 26 miles. And then I had another where I covered a large neighborhood and out there and back ran me about 15 or 16 miles.
Okay. But that's a huge project.
Yeah, it was like a coloring book. It was the notion that, okay, well, I've covered these streets and then just kept moving. In my case, I live in the far eastern portion of my zip code. So I was just inching my way westward and then from north to south or south to north and kind of filling it in literally like I was coloring a picture.
So you actually sent me your heat map. So let's see if I can share my screen here and we can pull it up. So it's clear the area where you live over here.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Obviously, you can see that I do spend a lot of time at Papago Park as well, but I don't tend to run there. I tend to drive there and run. As I got, bored with what's, the deep red on the eastern side of the heat map, I just started to move my way south and then to the west. And I think that one of my longer runs, I actually did do kind of an outline of the zip code, and then I proceeded to fill it in from there. It was kind of fun trying to figure out different strategies and different ways to approach it.
What was your strategy? How did you plan your runs? How did you track your runs and figure out what you had left to go and what you had already completed?
Well, at first I had no strategy. I was just out running, and as I mentioned, I probably wasn't very efficient. If I had to guess how many miles I covered in all of my runs, like I said, I think you could probably do it in 100 or so miles. It took me well over 200, I'm sure. But that was because I was also exclusively starting from my home base, which is on the far one side. Because I wasn't really too particular in the beginning, I had a lot of backtracking and filling in to do. But what I did start to do a little bit later on some of the last few streets was kind of take a directional approach, like, okay, well, this time I'm going to go run north south. And then, I would basically just run, I'd, get to where I was going to run, then run south, then run north, then run south, then run north. And then the next time I ran in that area, whether it be a day, a week, or a couple weeks later, I would go east-west and kind of fill it in. And if you look at Sycamore Creek/Oak Park, I went north from the bottom of that area down and then, over and then down. And then few weeks later, I think I went back in and just kind of went back and forth east west. And you can tell due to the coloring, I only hit that area once.
You actually did pretty good, especially once you got up here in the upper left-hand corner of not doing a whole lot of backtracking, actually.
Once I had my mind on it, I started to be more efficient. At one point, I really did just kind of want to get it done.
Right. So you mentioned that you did all of this from your house. Are you saying that none of this you drove and parked your car and did the runs you left from your house?
I think I might have actually started from one point for a short run on one of them along the way, that I still considered myself having started from home and gone out and back and on all of my runs. So
that's impressive. I don't think that I would take that same approach when I try and do my zip code.
If I were to do a larger area, I mean, it would be impossible to want to do like every street from home. I mean, unless you lived like flat out center and everything was, reasonable. I mean, Scottsdale has very funky dimensions. And this is why when people ask, they're like, are you going to do the same thing for the whole city of Scottsdale? I'm like, no.
I think for this challenge, what we're really hoping that participants get out of it is just the opportunity to explore areas where they've never been. Do you feel like you had that experience while you did it? Was there little nooks and crannies in the neighborhood in your zip code that you just never visited before?
That was actually one of the funny things about it. Just south of where I am, there's an area called Scottsdale Trails. Ironically, there's no trails to be found covering that stretch of the neighborhood, but there were, without exaggeration, 15 cul-de-sacs that I had to go in and out of. I tried to get those done in the daytime. So those were the 10 a.m. on Saturday Sufferfests. As you know, things can get pretty warm here in Arizona. Another thing that I actually really got out of it was because this area is older, there were some neighborhoods that that had a different ambiance to them. There's a neighborhood called Scottsdale Highview. That these were the very early neighborhoods in town. And you can see also there are other places where they've actually attempted to build some new things over the old. And that was kind of one of the things that I got from that I didn't expect to. It gave me an awareness of what was going on, the different projects that were being developed in my zip code.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen Ricky Gates' website, but what he does is he has maybe 15 different galleries that's on there. And so it's divided into cats and flowers and street signs. And so as he's out on his runs, he has these 10 to 15 different themes in mind, and he takes photos of all the cats that he sees on his run. And it's just a gallery of 20 or 30 different pictures. But it's really interesting to just approach it also with that point of view, because then you're looking for things that you otherwise would just run right past and not even pay any attention to. So if you haven't looked at his website, I suggest checking it out. It's really interesting.
I'll definitely check it out. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that because in this area, there were several houses that look like faces, bi-level and tri-level homes, with two upper windows and then maybe some trim across like a face. And I started noticing that kind of thing. Didn't take pictures, but it's funny what you'll tend to notice. One of the cool things about doing this project also wasn't just doing every street, but the Scottsdale area is known for what's called the Green Belt. The Green Belt is for those that aren't familiar, a green space that basically bisects, the bottom half of town. And I did a lot of green belt miles to cut back and forth, gave me an appreciation for that. One of the things about the green belt is that it's one of the few places where there actually is water, a couple of little ponds and streams that connect the ponds. And at night, I would have to actually watch where I was stepping on the bike paths and sidewalks because there were tons and tons of frogs.
It's nice to break up all the streets, though, as well. You don't really think of the parks being part of every damn street, but of course it should be.
It was definitely a nice way to break things up.
So tell me, are you going to choose a different zip code for this challenge?
So I started to do the zip code just north of ours, and I've done, I would say, if I had to guess, about a quarter of it. By the time I get there, I mean, I'm not a super long distance runner most of the time. So if I go out and I cover, 7, 8 miles on a run, that's a pretty decent total for me. 2.5 miles, and 2.5 miles back, it adds up in a hurry.
Well, you could always pare it down. Your goal could be just to run every street in Old Town. It doesn't have to be the whole zip code. It's kind of the great thing about the challenge is that it's customizable to whatever size you want. You just have to find the right thing to pare it down to.
That's one of the things that I kind of have developed a hobby now, taking my heat map and trying to color it in as I go. It's kind of become a part of my routine. It's like, okay, how can I cover a mileage or distance that I haven't normally covered?
It's great hearing about your experience, and hopefully it encourages some participants to get out there and do their zip code as well.
I look forward to seeing what everybody does. I'm sure that there are going to be people that do some absolutely amazing things. Got to keep engaged somehow. And since we're kind of limited in terms of what we can do from a social standpoint, it's up to us to try and find what inspires us and what keeps us going. And one of the things that I've learned is that I like coloring, and if I can do a little bit of coloring with my legs, then so be it.
Very good. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking time to tell us about your experience.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Bye.